My name is Dan Kornhauser.
And I'm Sam Teets.
Thank you guys for tuning in for another edition of the NFL Draft Show here on The Grueling Truth, where legends speak. Before we get started, I want to let you guys know that we are brought to you by betting.net, and betting.net is your best bet for sportsbook and casino sites, so head on over to betting.net. Now, we have done a lot of these shows, and we have covered a lot of different topics. We've done mock drafts. We've talked about teams, individuals, so on and so forth. We've done scouting combines, Senior Bowl, the whole lot. But we are just a few weeks away from the start of the NFL draft. It is on Thursday, April 28th is when it starts. I will hopefully be out there in Vegas covering the draft, but we shall see. Regardless, it's almost time. And with that in mind, we only have, 4, maybe 5 shows left until the draft. And since our last show before the draft is going to be our final mock draft in preparation that week, we still have to do our positional rankings. And as much as people love mock drafts, they love rankings even more. And I can't wait to start spilling the beans here and see who likes our rankings, who thinks they suck. I'm excited. And we already got one comment from Denise Keskin. Keeskin, I'm sorry, I'm terrible with last names, but thank you for tuning in. Hello. And Sam, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's get right into it. Quarterbacks first, right?
Whoa! We're starting with the quarterbacks, baby. So we've talked a lot about this position, and I think we've said, for the most part, everything we want to say, pro days aside. But without delving too deep into it, Sam, I need you to give me your top 5. Because let's be honest, there's not 10 quarterbacks worth talking about. And for me personally, once you get past like number 7, who for me is Bailey Zappi, spoiler alert. After that, we're talking about backups, projects, a lot of question marks with those guys. So I think we'll cut it off at 5 for now, because really that's all that really matters in this class. There's 5 quarterbacks that everyone's talking about. 6 maybe, but really it's 5. Give me your top 5.
Yeah, my number 1, it seems to be the number 1 for most people now, is Malik Willis, just based on the physical traits. Then you have Kenny Pickett at 2, Matt Corral at 3, Sam Howell at 4, and Desmond Ridder at 5. I think we recognize that means that Carson Strong and Bailey Zappi are the other 2 guys in that top 7.
That's right. Now, before I give you my top 5, top 7, are there any other quarterbacks that you personally think are worth talking about at all outside of these top guys?
There's some that intrigue me after Zappi. The one guy who I really look at and say maybe is Akil Glass from Alabama A&M.
Okay.
I think that's a guy who might be good in the NFL level. He's going to be a day 3 selection. But I think if you're just throwing a dart and betting on someone to turn out pretty good from this draft class, I almost feel better going after him than I would after someone like Zappi, frankly. I think someone like Glass actually has a higher ceiling. It's just that he's very mechanically, he's very raw. You know, there are a lot of mistakes there. You can see his footwork. There's stuff he needs to address, but I do feel good about taking a shot on him in day 3.
Okay. I like that. Here we go. Day 3 quarterbacks for you folks out there whose teams are quarterback needy and you miss out on the top guys. For me, now I had been playing with these rankings a lot recently, and I have 3 quarterbacks ranked in my top 32, and I have them ranked numbers 30, 31, and 32. And while I do have the same top 3 quarterbacks that you have, Sam, I do have them in a different order, and it might be a little controversial. I've had this quarterback as my QB1 during the early part of the process, during the season. He was my QB1. I really like this kid's game. Things kind of tapered off as the offseason went on. He was hurt. He didn't work out at the Combine or the Senior Bowl. He didn't do anything literally until his pro day. And by saying all this, you probably know who I'm talking about, Sam. My top QB is Matt Corral. Love this kid for a variety of reasons. I know I've touched on those in the past, but Matt Corral's my number 1. Malik Willis is right behind him at number 2. Kenny Pickett 3, Sam Howell 4, and Desmond Ridder 5. I do have Carson Strong 6 and Bailey Zappi 7. Now, all in all, I have 7 quarterbacks in my top 102. with my top 4 being ranked in the top 36. They all fall between 30 and 36. What kind of difference do you have between your quarterbacks and your rankings?
Yeah, my QBs are a lot lower than yours. My first quarterback comes off the board at 46. That's Malik Willis. And there's a huge bunch of them. Like between 46 and 51, all my top 4 guys go. So Willis, Pickett, Corral, Howell all go within 6 or 7 picks of one another. And then there's a drop. Desmond Ridder at 60. Another drop. It's Carson Strong at 87. And then Bailey Zappi at 125. So I am lower. I am about lower by almost 20 spots on most of these guys. I imagine it's probably consistent for every QB. I'm probably 20 spots lower on all of them than you are.
Well, for me, now, for you, when you were doing your QB rankings, how much did the positional value
None at all
play?
None at all. I didn't look at position value at all. And that would change. I would change things quite a bit. I mean, I would probably have guys closer to being in the 20s than if we're talking about positional value. Okay. I might even have Malik Willis inside the top 20 if we're talking about something like that. But
okay,
while position value I think is really important when it comes to draft time, I also think it really skews to having like a lot of QBs, a lot of tackles, corners, edge rushers up towards the top. And I do like to try to give the running backs and linebackers a fair shake. So I didn't really pay attention to positional value when I do these rankings.
Okay, fair enough. We'll keep that in mind moving forward. The only reason these guys are up there is because of positional value. But I refused, because I don't really feel comfortable calling any of these guys upper echelon starting quarterbacks, franchise type quarterbacks. Those guys go in the top 5, top 10, top 12 generally. Granted, there's always outliers. But I'm not comfortable saying that about any of these guys right now in this process. And I know the whole thing coming in was these guys, the NFL is not high on them. Teams are not quite pleased with this quarterback group. They were going after all these veteran quarterbacks, these free agent types, rather than, invest in one of these quarterbacks too high. So that should tell you all you need to know about this quarterback class. And like I said, we've given them a lot of love. And I do want to say, I got to say this. I don't know if I've actually said it on air, but if I have, good, because I want to say it again. I was watching some Sam Howell clips earlier today, and I was watching some clips of him from his pro day. And, I can't help it. I'm like 80, you know what? Not even. I'm like 69% sure you and Sam Howell are somehow related. Because when I look at a picture of Sam Howell, like in the program or like his school photo that they have on the website or whatever, I mean, when I see him, I see you, but you have more facial hair and slightly different hairstyle. But when I see y'all, I look the same when y'all smile, and it's uncanny and it's ridiculous. And I'll need to interview you when we get closer to the draft to see your pre-draft process and how it's gone.
No, I trust me. I get it. Like I do. I really look at him sometimes. Like the beard is a little bit shaved back, but I trust me. I see it. I understand it.
I'm watching the show. I just started laughing. I'm like, God, I know I've told you this off the air, but I don't remember if I've said it on air. And I was like, I got to say something about this tonight. I got to do it. It's uncanny to me. You guys, that's your doppelbanger. I swear.
Hey, he's doing better than I am. He's about to be walking into a lot of money.
Go to North Carolina in a Sam Howell jersey. Just walk around campus and see people like, yo, Sam. And you could look over and be like, yo, what up?
Yeah, it would work. I might do that one day.
In the NFL right now? No, don't worry about it, bro. I'm taking extra classes. It's fine. No worries. Fucking love it. But anyway, all right, so let's move on. Let's move on from the quarterbacks. Before we do move on, I want to remind you guys that your top sportsbook comparison site is betting.net. Betting.net offers extensive reviews on the best sportsbooks out there. So head on over to betting.net. And now from Sam Howell and Sam Teets, we're going to move on to the to the running back position. Now, we have talked a little bit about this position, and we've talked about some of the top guys a little bit earlier during the process. But we haven't really given this position as much love as I think it might deserve. And the more work and more study I put into this position for this class, the more I like it. It's different. And there's a lot of talented running backs that have special skills. There's not many all-around guys, someone that you can say plays all 3 downs, can play goal line, can play 3rd down and long. There's not a lot of those in this class. And there's really, it doesn't appear to be any front end guys like a Zeke Elliott or Saquon Barkley or someone like that is going to go in the top half of the first round. But it's a good class, and teams are always looking for quality rotational backs on the second and third day of the draft. So let's dive right into it. All right, let's rank these running backs. Since you started with the quarterbacks, I'll start us off with the running backs. Now, this is a position that I have been very clear with my RB1, and he has been the RB1 for quite some time through this process. I'm talking about Breece Hall, the running back from Iowa State, 5'11", 220. We haven't really talked about this guy, but as far as a starting caliber running back, a 3-down guy, I think he might be the only one in this class. And with that in mind, I think he's also the only running back that we could see realistically at the tail end of the first round. Now, I don't necessarily think running backs should go in the first round, and that is reflected in my grade because I do have him at 48th overall on my big board right now. And now that's something I've been playing with as well, somewhere between like 40 and 50 range, which I think is pretty fair. And in that range, if you're at the back end of the first round, that's a guy you might be looking at if you need some talent at the position. And there are a few teams at the back end of the first round that could very well use a guy like Breece Hall. So I have him number 1, and then just going to chug through the rest of this. I got Kenneth Walker from Michigan State 2, Isaiah Spiller 3, Jerome Ford from Cincinnati 4. I got Dameon Pierce out of Florida 5, James Cook 6, Brian Robinson Jr. 7, Pierre Strong out of South Dakota State 8. I'm a poet, I didn't know it. Kyron Williams from Notre Dame 9, and Rachaad White, the Arizona State running back, at number 10. And as far as my grades for these guys go, Breece Hall is my highest at 48. Kenneth Walker is second at 74th. And Rachaad White clocks in at 129th overall on my big board. And Sam, we go to you now for your top 10. Then we can go back and discuss these guys a little bit. But let's go with your top 10 real quick. I have a couple questions after your top 10.
Yeah. And we got the top 2, same guys, just different order. I got Kenneth Walker at 1, Breece Hall at 2. And I'll tell you where they rank on my big board in a minute. But I got Kenneth Walker 1, Breece Hall 2. Dameon Pierce is actually my running back 3.
Nice.
I love a running back in pass protect. Number 4, Jerome Ford. 5 is Isaiah Spiller. 6 is James Cook. 7 is Tyler Algier from BYU. 8 is Rachaad White from Arizona State. 9 is Brian Robinson Jr. from Alabama. And 10 is Pierre Strong Jr. from South Dakota State. Kyron Williams is 11. That's the one guy you have that I didn't have.
Okay. So where does Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall sit? Where do they sit currently on your big board?
Kenneth Walker is 36. Breece Hall is 38.
Okay. A bit higher than mine. I have Breece Hall at 48. I got Kenneth Walker at 74.
I have Dameon Pierce all the way down at 76. So my running back 3 is all the way down there at 76.
Dude, for me, once Walker, if these guys fall off the face of the earth, I have a bottom of the third round grade on Spiller at 90th. Then I got Ford and Pierce at 106 and 109 respectively.
I think this is a lot. There's a lot of third round running backs in this class. You're going to see a bunch of running backs go third round, fourth round for sure, and probably top of the fifth round. You're going to see probably all of these guys we talked about, with the exception of Hall and Walker, probably fall into that range.
Yeah, and as we discussed going over the quarterbacks, while you don't factor positional value when doing your rankings, I do. So for me, my quarterbacks went up a little bit. Yours were a little lower than mine because of your lack of positional value. And then for the running backs, my guys are also a little bit lower than yours. Yours are going more off of talent, NFL fit, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't really factor that. There's no positional value to me. If you have a receiver, if we're talking about positional value, if you have a receiver that's probably a top 50 player versus a running back who's a top 40 player, positional value probably makes it so that receiver jumps the running back on the board. For me, that would not be the case. I'm taking the running back ahead of him in that situation. So, for instance, I think I've got 5 receivers ahead of Kenneth Walker as my top running back. You could probably make the argument for putting 6 or 7 receivers ahead of the top running back in this class fairly easily. And I think the way the NFL drafts guys, it will probably reflect that.
I actually have 7 wide receivers ahead of Breece Hall.
Well, there you go.
How serendipitous. It's almost like you know. You got some
It's almost
ESPN going on, bud. So, all right. Now, I have Hall 1, Walker 2. What makes Walker your RB1 in this class?
I think the explosion. I understand Brees Hall, his receiving ability is probably what's going to separate him when it comes to the NFL draft. Teams are going to look at him as a guy who can contribute on third downs quite a bit more. With Walker, I do think he has some receiving ability, just wasn't asked to do a lot of that in Michigan State. But when I watch Walker, Brees Hall has that home run speed. Walker's just as fast, though, if you watch the 40 time. And I think he really values like the speed to power with him is incredible. He hits the hole, and there's just a burst of energy. The first 10 yards, you're not going to be able to touch him. Even if you try to hit him, he's probably going to run you over or stiff arm you. He's not like a true bowling ball kind of back, but he's got a lot of power in his body, stiff arms, like I mentioned. And he has a surprising ability to stop and cut. Like he really, for someone who accelerates as quickly as he does, can stop and cut, can put a move on a guy. The second guy kind of bring him down, a linebacker, whether it be a defensive back coming up. Doesn't necessarily have to hit the guy with power. He can stop and cut a move on you pretty quickly. And that really separates him to me. I understand the upside with Brees Hall, but I really like a guy who can go in between the tackles and be really effective. And I think Kenneth Walker, to me, is that guy who can consistently get you a couple of 10 or 15-yard runs a game, where Brees Hall might get you 190-yarder, but I think Kenneth Walker will be more consistent on a down-to-down basis.
Yeah, Walker definitely has that is a bigger home run threat than Hall. You are right about that. Hall doesn't really break him off like that. Despite his 4.4 speed, it was between 4.39 and 4.44 at the combine for Hall. Hall also had a 40-inch vertical and a 10.6 broad jump, which, I mean, you want to talk about explosiveness. Those rank amongst the best in this class. So Brees Hall is nothing to shake your nose at when it comes to that. Now, one last thing before we move on to the receiver position. Which one of these running backs in the mid-range, maybe the end of the second day, early third day, which one of these backs do you think can make a real difference? Because we always have these guys who are taken third, fourth, fifth, sixth round, hell, even undrafted guys at the running back position who make a mark on the NFL one way or another. So which one of these mid-range guys do you think has the best opportunity to have the best NFL career? Obviously, fit matters, but without that in mind.
Yeah, and fit will be huge, but there are three guys that I look at and say could really be impactful. Brian Robinson, just from a pure power perspective, we saw what he did at Alabama. That's going to just power translates for guys like that. And if you end up being a Ramondre Stevenson that gets picked by New England, congratulations, you're going to have a solid NFL career. I mean, it just happens. You get put behind an offensive line like that, it's going to work out. If Brian Robinson got drafted, and they won't do this because they just signed Leonard Fournette, but they got drafted by Tampa Bay, I mean, immediately, that's your NFL career right there. You're playing behind a bunch of guys who are really good run blockers, and from that point on, you're set. So I think Brian Robinson, depending on where he goes, will be an impact player. James Cook in the receiving game, certainly, because he is a guy who can legitimately line up potentially in the slot, and he's going to give you mismatches for days. Not so much of an interior running kind of guy, but he plays into that modern receiving role. And the guy who I really like, and probably I'm higher on than a lot of people, Jerome Ford, who's my running back 4. I think there's a lot of explosion there, and you can see the big playability he has. He's one of the few players who was consistent, I believe, in the game against Alabama in the college football playoffs. I think he was actually making a bit of an impact there despite going up against a really dominant Alabama defensive front behind Cincinnati's offensive line. Doesn't have a lot of NFL talent. So Jerome Ford's a player that I like quite a bit.
And then one final question on your rankings for the running back position. You have my boy Dameon Pierce. I'm a Gators fan. You got Dameon Pierce as your RB3 ahead of Spiller, Ford, Cook, etc. What gives Pierce the edge over some of these other guys? He's not as explosive as some of these other running backs, and he's not the receiver some of these guys are. So what puts him up there for you?
He's got a good amount of power, but also he's really good in pass protection. We have to see him in a lot of one-on-one reps, especially at the Senior Bowl, and he's stonewall guys who probably have maybe 20 pounds on him. He's also going to actually probably way more than some of the linebackers he faces up against in the NFL level. So there's an opportunity for that as well. But frankly, I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. If we didn't get to see it, Florida, I just like what I see on tape from him and what his potential is at next level. And frankly, when we talk about running backs, a lot of these guys are broken down by the time they're 25, 26 years old, just from the constant pounding they take. Someone like Dameon Pierce, who hasn't taken that amount of abuse in Florida, is going to last 6 or 7 years in the NFL, where someone like, I don't know, like Brian Robinson might not make it to second contract and being a player who's an impact guy at that point. So I think
That is
that is something that, like, is it really fair to factor that into a big board? I don't know. I don't know if you can say it's fair, but I definitely was thinking about that as I was putting things together.
That's something I was going to say. That's great because I think that's definitely something NFL teams think about when they are doing their own big boards, because NFL teams do their own boards. They do their own charts. They do their own rankings. That's a thing. People don't just do this just to do it. All right. It's a part of the process, and NFL teams do it too. So when they're putting their own rankings together and their own big boards and shit, they're probably looking at stuff like that too. They probably say, well, oh, this guy has 600 carries in college over 3 years or 2 years or something like that. This other guy's got 250 carries in his senior year and 100 other over the other 3. That's a huge difference in wear and tear. And that's where a guy like even Derrick Henry, for example, that's probably something teams looked at and said, well, okay, yeah, he runs too high, and he gets a lot of hits in his legs because he's so big, and that could lead to injuries and the tread on his tires because Alabama fed him the rock, and as they should have. But those are all probably factors as to why he dropped to the second round. Derrick Henry probably would have been a first round pick if he didn't have all that tread. Teams definitely consider that. So that's cool that you mentioned that and throw that out there. Give the folks watching at home an idea of what goes into your thought process behind some of these rankings. So before we move on to the receiver position, I want to remind you guys that the Grueling Truth is powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online casino or sportsbook that's right for you. So head on over to betting.net. So let's move on to the wide receiver position. Now, honestly, we could probably do like a top 15 or something like that, because I don't know about you, but I got
a lot.
Let me see. I'm going to count them right now. Okay, 1, 2. I got 19 wide receivers in my top 100.
I have 14, but I have 14, but I got one at 101, so I have basically 15.
So there you go. So we could probably do a top 15. I'm not going to do it, though. Let's do a top 10. You started quarterbacks. I did running backs. Why don't you start us off with wide receivers?
All right. My wide receiver 1 is Drake London from USC. He's one of the few guys who actually have a first-round grade on from the wide receiver position. The other one being Jameson Williams, my wide receiver 2. From there, we go down to my wide receiver 3 is Chris Olave. 4 is Garrett Wilson, so back-to-back from Ohio State. 5 is Treylon Burks. 6 is Christian Watson. 7 is Jahan Dotson. 8 is Sky Moore. 9 is George Pickens. And then number 10 is Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama.
Hold on. 8 was Moore. Who was 9 and 10?
9 was George Pickens from Georgia. And 10 is Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama.
Okay. All right. So I'm just putting these numbers together on my chart here. So I have mine on one side. I got yours on the other. All right. So you've got Drake London 1, Jameson Williams 2, Chris Olave 3, Garrett Wilson 4, Treylon Burks 5, Christian Watson from North Dakota State 6, Jahan Dotson 7, Sky Moore 8, George Pickens 9, and Jalen Tolbert, South Alabama 10th. Now, I have a little different.
I imagine.
I have the same top 7 names as you do, but it's going to be a little different at the back end of that top 10 there. So for me, my wide receiver 1 is Garrett Wilson. I have Jameson Williams 2, Drake London 3, Chris Olave 4, Treylon Burks 5, Jahan Dotson 6, Christian Watson 7, David Bell 8, Khalil Shakir 9, and George Pickens 10. Now let's talk about this a little bit. What makes Drake London your wide receiver 1?
He's a player that, and it's hard because there's a little bit of gut feeling baked into this, but this is a guy who I watch, he just wins consistently. It's not all in contested catch situations. He's got a massive build for a wide receiver position, and he does separate. He creates separation. He's a better route runner than a guy that size should be. He does pretty well for himself. He's not like a DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, I get DK Metcalf has worked out in the NFL level, but primarily he won as a rookie running straight down the field. And Drake London's not going to necessarily have to do that. Drake London, I think, does better as a route runner than you might anticipate for someone his size And there's a lot of yards with the catchability there because he's going to be able to run guys over. He has the physicality. He's going to be able to run block for you. There's a lot of things he can do that I don't think he gets credit for because he's viewed as just this contested catch receiver, and that's not accurate.
Okay, I like that. Now, give me a second because I want to say something, but I want a visual to kind of like really cement it for everyone. And to just give everyone so hold on one sec. Let me see if this little, oh, yes, it's here. All right, here we go.
I'm scared.
You should be. Here we go. All right, so this is a prop that I've used on the Dan and Bob Talking Sports show, and it's one of my favorite accessories. And this is a pineapple. This is a cool pineapple. And the reason I brought this out is because I want to say pineapples to your wide receiver rankings. Pineapples is the safe word, which means I don't feel comfortable right now and I need an adult. So I'm going to say pineapples to your rankings. I think I've said this before, but I hate that you don't have as much love as I do for Garrett Wilson. Why is he your wide receiver 4? Because he's my wide receiver 1. That's my boy.
I don't think he's a top receiver in the NFL. I just don't think it. I look at the guy. He's got route running. He's got some stuff. I don't view this guy as going to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. I just don't think he's going to be a top option. I think Drake London has that ability. I think Jameson Williams has that ability. I think Chris Olave, at the very least, is going to be a top-level wide receiver 2. And I think Garrett Wilson just has a lower floor than all those guys.
You know what? I'm going to leave Mr. Pineapple right there. I'm going to call him Derek. Bow wow. It's Derek. And, I'm hearing you on that one. But, here we go. Here comes Bobby. Ananas. Piñas. Pineapples. I don't like it. So, are you not concerned about Drake London's inability to separate?
I think he separates better than he's given credit for, frankly. And now, I will say this. He's going to have to be in a lot more contested catch situations than most of the other receivers up here. Mm-hmm. But he won it about 70% on contested catches last year.
Beast.
And he'll do that again. I mean, he does it at an elite level, and he'll do it in the NFL as well. So I'm not really worried about that for Drake London. Now, will it work for everyone? Like Drake London going to Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts, that's probably not going to work out. If Drake London goes to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, you're golden. So it kind of does depend to some extent who you're going to play with. So there are quarterbacks who will spray the ball left and right all over the field, or maybe not go for those contested catch situations, guys who are too conservative to throw the ball up in those scenarios. So it's not like he's going to fit everywhere. But at the end of the day, I do view him as being the highest end caliber receiver in this draft class.
So you see him being more of a Mike Evans type?
To some extent. He's not going to be as fast as Mike Evans per se, but I think he'll be in that level of a Mike Evans, Cortland Sutton type kind of player.
A legit wide receiver 1.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I hate it, but I like your explanation. You've definitely put some thought into this. Now, it's not like I have Drake London so far down my board. Let's be honest here. I have him as my wide receiver 3, but I have him at number 14 overall on my big board. So, yeah, I'm splitting hairs, but I got to do it. We haven't really challenged each other on some of our rankings and some of our statements. So this is one thing that's always stood out to me, and I hate it. I hate it so much. Because when I look at Wilson, when I look at Garrett Wilson, I see like a Keenan Allen light. I see good route running. I see short area burst and separation. And from what we saw with his workouts, he can take it the distance. He has that big play threat. He's got that deep speed. So it's not like he's pigeonholed into being a slot receiver or, a West Coast kind of a guy. I think he could profile as a wide receiver 1 in pretty much whatever offense. Now, while I don't think, like you mentioned, he's as good in contested catches as Drake, he's still someone who's strong enough to catch the ball in tight contested areas. So I know a lot of people have Wilson as their wide receiver 1. So you having Drake London, it's not far-fetched because there is another very popular draft website that has London as their number 2 overall prospect on the board.
Wait, who?
Walter Football.
Oh, I don't care. But yeah, don't let me in this. Their rankings. I go to their rankings just to find names. Sometimes in the very early part of the draft process, I don't go there for the actual rankings.
Well, I mean, Charlie Campbell, their mock draft and rankings guru, is actually pretty good in terms of accuracy on his top 100 board and in terms of mock draft. He's not one of the best, but he's above average. So I like the website.
I'd love to talk to him sometimes. I disagree highly with a lot of stuff they rank out there. I think he has a lot of like spicy rankings out there, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, like I do a consensus big board. So I think I mentioned this before on the show.
Yeah, you have. You talked about this.
Yeah, I track about 12 different websites and draft analysts, including Charlie Campbell for Walter Football. I do PFF, Sporting News, Bleacher Report, Daniel Jeremiah, Kyle Krabs from the Draft Network, Matt Miller from the Draft Scout. So I do all the big boys. And I think at this point, I have 12 different rankings, 12 different analysts or whatever. And Walter Football's, Charlie Campbell's is always crazy. Now, I guess that could be a good thing because, you don't want your big board to look like anybody else's big board. These things should be pretty much like fingerprints. Everybody's is different one way or the other. If everyone's was the same, it wouldn't be that much fun. Why do we even do it? If everyone's going to see the same shit, everyone's going to say the same things, why do we even do this? Then the NFL draft loses its entertainment because, well, everybody knows what they need to know. Everybody agrees. So, Joe Schmo can do it, and you don't need to be some big NFL tycoon who knows, whatever they're talking about. So the fact that their rankings are so different and we call them crazy to a front, it's fine.
That's fun, though. That's part of the fun process.
Exactly. That's what the draft is about. And I would love to pick his brain because, like, there's stuff like having, like, Wandale Robinson from Kentucky is like a top 20 prospect overall or something like that. And they've had him up there for months now. So obviously they're seeing something that we're not. And I'm a Gators fan, and I hate Kentucky. But I've seen this kid. He's in the SEC. I watch SEC games. So I know who he is, and I know his talent, his jittery bugness, all that good stuff. But, like, for example, I got him at 93 on my big board. And the biggest issue with me is I think he's pigeonholed as a slot guy. He's 5'8", 180 pounds. I weighed 180 pounds in my freshman year of high school. So, it's a grown-ass man. He needs to have some cheeseburgers or something like that.
I've got Wandale at 136.
Woo! So you're even lower.
The issue is I'm never going to be as high on slot receivers as I am on, like, the guys who I feel who have true outside ability or guys who I feel like can go inside out. Like someone like John Metchie, my wide receiver 11, who I didn't talk about. Yep. I feel like you could play him in the slot or out wide, and he could be successful in either position. Someone like Sky Moore is a slot receiver. But Sky Moore is also like 200 pounds as a slot receiver. He's going to be like a rocked up guy who's going to get you yards after the catch. Someone like a Calvin Austin, a Wendell Robinson, a Kyle Phillips from UCLA, all good players will all have a spot in the NFL.
Yep.
But they're inherently more limited. Not all these guys are going to be Hunter Renfrow. Like they're not all going to turn into the 1,000-yard slot receiver who just catches everything. Is able to put like 6 moves on a guy in basically a phone booth and get open. Like that's not going to happen for everyone.
You're not wrong. That's definitely a thing. And someone who's 178 pounds soaking wet, or Calvin Austin 170 pounds after having a large pie from Domino's and some breadsticks. That's a thing. There's a reason. As good as some of these receivers, some of these players are in college, they might have been all Americans in college, all conference, setting all sorts of records and doing all sorts of crazy shit. But they go to the NFL and you see them fall to the 4th, 5th round. Oh, but they ran a 4.40. Oh, but their agility and this and but at the end of the day, the NFL, yes, they value speed, but the NFL values their prototypes. Okay, that's why some guys are first-round picks. As opposed, when it comes to the draft, you'll see, oh, how could this guy be a first-round pick? I had him in the 2nd or 3rd round. I know the Seahawks used to do that almost on a yearly basis. I remember them taking Bruce Irvin and thinking, what the hell are these guys doing? I mean, we knew Irvin was athletic and he had the prototype size, but there was a lot missing from his game. And they took him in the middle of the first round, I think it was. And that's just one of those things. Why did he go there? Sure, being uber athletic as he was helps, but he went there opposed to some other potential edge rushers because he had that prototype size, the length. He had the measurables that they drool over, which is why teams are falling in love with Trayvon Walker. But we're not here to talk about the D-line. We'll get back to Trayvon Walker and all that good stuff and moving on as part of our 3-part series of our positional rankings. So I got a little off board there. I got a little excited, but
That's all good.
So I have David Bell out of Purdue and Khalil Shakir in my top 10. You don't. Where do you have them ranked on your top 10, and why don't you have them in there?
One of these is going to cause an issue. But I have John Mechie, like I said, at 11. I have Justin Ross at 12. I have Khalil Shakir at 13. He's 92. I think he's going to be a slot receiver in the NFL, but he's 6'1", 196. He's going to be a larger slot receiver, and I love his ability to separate run routes. So I have him at 92. Then I have Alec Pierce, who's just a big, tall, physical, freakish player with all of the agility and like speed in the world. That kind of size at 99. Romeo Dubs at wide receiver 15 at 101.
Dubs.
David Bell at wide receiver 16. This is probably the one that's going to cause issues. I like David Bell. I like what he did in college. David Bell is the kind of receiver that at his size terrifies me at the NFL level. Like, that's the guy who gets drafted in round 2 that absolutely horrifies me because like he's the kind of player who, while excellent at college, could really have issues in the NFL level. Yeah, I know this is going to be the issue. And as soon as you brought this question up, I'm like, this is going to be the issue. This is going to be pineapple time all over again.
Yeah, where's my boy at? Come here, Derek. Bow wow. You see this? I'm calling pineapples on you again. This is twice.
Yeah, I
in
knew
one
this was
position group. I'm disgusted. I'm so disgusted. Does Bell's route running, catching in traffic, footwork, his refinement in the passing game, does that mean nothing to you?
It does mean something to me, but I just genuinely look at him. It's not at the level of some of the guys we previously talked about as far as he's a – how do I put this? He's well-rounded to an extent. He doesn't necessarily have one area of his game where I look at it and say, that's going to be fantastic. And I already know I am lower on him than a lot of people, almost everyone. I had a conversation – you mentioned Kyle Krabs from the Draft Network. I had a conversation with him on Twitter, and you might have seen that, regarding Christian Watson and David Bell. He is David Bell above Christian Watson. I do not, obviously. So that's a little bit back and forth as far as that goes. David Bell is going to be one of the players that I'm just going to probably be lower on than everyone else because I just don't think it projects well at the NFL level. Again, like I said, I recognize that at the college level he was a menace, but he's one of those players that I have trouble getting behind that prototype. I really do. I have trouble getting behind a guy like that. He's just not going to be someone who I'm going to go after. We're talking about projecting to the next level.
Is it his lack of like big play, like game-breaking ability? Is that part of it?
That's part of it, but also like even the contested catch situations, which I thought were played up during the season a little bit. That's part of a big part of his game because he's not. While he does separate, he doesn't have amazing separation. Well, it looked like he had a larger body in college than he actually tested in with. He was like him in like 6'1" maybe or something like that at the combine. I forget. It was smaller than we expected.
6'1", 212.
Yeah. I mean, the 212 is good size. Don't get me wrong. But then he didn't have necessarily everything I was looking for at the combine as well. And looking back, I still like the tape. But, I mean, he won maybe like 42% of his contested catch situations last year. Not even like a 50-50 guy in that level for that kind of stuff. And so I think it does – I just don't think he's the kind of receiver that I like. He's just not. To me, you're either someone who's a clean separator with a bunch of speed and twitch, or you're a guy who's going to be big enough to go up and win those kind of contested catch situations. Those are primarily the guys that I have put in the top 100 here. And David Bell doesn't really fall into either category. So I'm a little confused about where he's going to end up in the NFL.
I'm so disgusted, but it's fine. It's fine. I still appreciate you as a person. It's fine. Now, one.
Yeah, you really came out and said, "Oh, it's okay. I still appreciate you as a person, but this ranking sucks."
I hate it. I hate it so much. So, two more things about the receiver position. Then we move on to the tight ends, which is Bobby's favorite position for several reasons. But you have Christian Watson as number 6 on in your wide receiver rankings, right outside the big 5, the big boys. Where does that 6th wide receiver ranking put him overall on your big board?
Overall, he's at 40. So
40.
This guy's going to be a little bit lower than I think. Well, I know T. Higgins was 33. So it's going to be probably in that a little lower than Higgins. I think it's going to be a little lower than where Michael Pittman went as well. I think Pittman was also in the 30s, I believe, when he came off the board a couple of years ago. So I think he's going to be a little bit lower than those guys, but in a similar realm. And I remember that because obviously went to Clemson. So I remember T. Higgins having a potential first-round draft hype going into that night. I think there's going to be some of that for Christian Watson, not nearly the same extent. But when you look at Green Bay having a pick late in the first round, you're going to look at Kansas City having 2 picks late in the first round. There's going to be some talk about him, Christian Watson, probably going to those teams. I don't think it happens. I think he goes on day 2. But there might be some talk about him going day 1.
Now, are you buying those first-round statements? Do you really think he's someone who's in play for a team like Kansas City or someone in the back of that first round?
I don't think so, because from what I've heard is that the NFL is not as high on him as maybe some other people, like people outside the NFL are potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think he's a solidified day 2 guy, in my opinion. So I think there are going to be rumors. And again, it only takes one team to buy in to actually like him to go in the first round. That's all it takes. But I do think he's a day 2 guy. Part of it's going to be the route running to some extent.
Okay.
Part of it's also going to be the fact that he went against lower level competition, so there's a little bit more risk when it comes to buying into Christian Watson.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really going to carry him is the agility, the speed, and he does have a lot of agility. He's got really good releases, in my opinion. I do think there's some concerns with him creating separation on intermediate level routes, which again is a little bit of the route running aspect to it. But this is a guy who I think primarily is going to be asked to go and just blow games open, essentially. Go deep and make something happen. And there's going to be offense. Like, if you put him with, and this is not, I'm not saying this can happen with the Justin Herbert, with the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allen, it's curtains. I mean, this guy, to some extent, is going to give you maybe even a little bit more than what Jameson Williams is going to give you, and you can get him in the second round. Now, the thing with Jameson Williams is you can throw him balls short, and he's going to be able to move around a lot better in short spaces to create yards with the catch. Christian Watson, while still very agile, he is 6'4". He's going to move a little bit. He's going to be a little bit more obvious in his movements, per se. But I do think that he offers you quite a bit of stuff for a wide receiver who goes in the second round.
Okay. I like it. Now, I have Watson 47th overall on my big board, and he is my 7th wide receiver.
Yeah, so we're not that far apart on this one.
Not that far apart at all. Now, I have David Bell at 56 and Khalil Shakir at 57. So,
where do you have Justin Ross, out of curiosity?
You know, we've talked about Justin Ross, and I have him at 88th on my big board.
Okay. I think that's about fair. I think I have him in the 90s, I want to say. I have him at 90 exactly. So we're right around the same area on him.
He's my 14th wide receiver. Now, I have Jalen Tolbert at 86 overall, and I have
much higher.
I have Sky Moore at 71.
Okay,
now
I had Sky Moore at 49, and I have Jalen Tolbert at 67.
See, for me, where you have Sky Moore up there because of what the damage you think he can do in the slot and otherwise, I have him that low because I think he is just a slot guy.
No, I'll admit that.
That's where he's going to make his money. That's not a bad thing. Okay, that's not a bad thing at all. Because we got Hunter Renfrow. We look at back in the day, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, those guys, they make a living in the slot. Hell, CeeDee Lamb makes plays in the slot. So that's not a bad thing to say that the receiver is going to be pigeonholed as a slot guy. But
yeah, where do you have Jahan Dotson again?
Dotson, I have him as mine. He's at number 28th overall.
He's a guy I think is just a slot. He's not like Sky Moore to me, like I said, almost 200 pounds at his size is pretty good. Jahan Dotson, I think, is 178, 176 or something like that.
178.
That, for me, is a pure slot receiver. Now, I understand he might have a little bit more I'll call it short area quickness, a little bit more twitch than Sky Moore does. Sky Moore certainly can create yards just to catch in small spaces. I think Dotson's a little bit faster when I watch him in those twitchier areas.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think Sky Moore brings a little bit more to the table at the sense that I'm throwing Tyreek Hill's name out here for one reason only. It's because of the build as a receiver. He is a small guy with a little bit of twitch, and he is built.
He's burly.
He's someone who's going to be able to create yards after the catch. He's going to be able to break arm tackles. So I don't think it's like Jahan Dotson. If you get one arm on him and you're a larger player, you can just pull him down, in my opinion. Like he's fairly lightweight for a guy who could potentially go in the first round.
On the flip side, I know he's small, but whereas I see Sky Moore as strictly a slot guy, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, and I don't know if this is going to be pineapples for you. I'm going to have to break out Derek real quick.
Oh, you're not going to try to put him on the outside, are you?
I am.
Oh, I know.
And I've said this before. I said he could be – his game at Penn State reminds me of a poor man's Deshaun Jackson in that he doesn't have the speed that Jackson has, because we know Jackson was an all-time deep threat wide receiver. That's where he made his money, and as a punt returner. But those the deep passes, the game-breaking ability is what made Deshaun Jackson so relevant when he was on the Eagles and such. But while he doesn't have the deep speed that Jackson has, he makes those same type of plays. And he's a little smaller, 5'11", 178, okay? But I still think he's someone who can make plays in traffic, make plays on the outside. He did it at Penn State. And yes, college is different, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's some precedent there. It's not going to be new for him. It's not going to be something he hasn't done before. And unlike some of these other guys who are in a lot, like Justin Ross, for example, Clemson runs a lot of bubble screens, a lot of, short area passes, things like that.
It's disgusting. It's awful to watch.
It happens. It happens to the best of them. But while they run a lot of that short area, bubble screen, stuff like that, Penn State had this guy doing everything. He ran a pretty good route tree. It wasn't just goes and slants all day. So he's got that outside ability to his game. So I am a fan of Jahan Dotson. And I'll tell you what, if the Lions were in position to draft him later at the end of the first round, I think that would be a huge win for the Lions if they took him at the end of the first round. But let's move on from the wide receiver position. Before we do that, I do have to show some love to betting.net. It finds the best place to bet for you. So head on over to betting.net. They offer expert and user reviews for every online sportsbook and casino in your state. So head on over to betting.net. Now, this is the last position group of this episode. And just to break it down for folks who weren't watching the beginning or whatever, so we're doing a 3-part positional rankings preview of the 2022 NFL Draft. And we're starting today. We did quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends. Next week's show, we're going to be doing offensive line, defensive line, and edge rushers. And then our third part is going to be corners, linebackers, inside and out, strictly off ball. So linebackers, corners, and safeties to wrap things up. Then the week before the draft, I don't know what the date is, but the week before the draft, that Monday episode, we're going to go over rumors, all sorts of stuff, talk about things that we weren't able to talk about during these positional rankings. And then the Monday before the NFL draft, so the week of the draft, it's on April 28th. So that Monday before the draft, we'll be doing our final mock draft. We'll be ping-ponging those picks like we do. We'll be on the clock. We're going to drop some knowledge. And we want to be correct. That's what it's going to come down to. It's not going to be who we would take, because that's irrelevant. We're not the general managers. It's going to be, that mock draft's going to be who we think those teams are going to take with the interest of having the most right. And we'll see. We'll see who had the most picks right at the end of that mock. I'm very competitive, so I expect myself to have the most.
Okay.
Mock.
Yeah. No, I am also competitive, so it will be a fun. It'll be fun when half the first round picks get traded and none of it's relevant.
Yeah, you know what? We'll do it live. I'm good for a couple of those late round picks. So like I had Rashad Bateman going to the Ravens and stuff like that. So, I expect to hit on a couple of those late first rounders. That's what GOATs do. And I mean, this is the grueling truth where motherfucking legends speak. All right. And that's what we're doing. You're watching a couple of goats talk right now. So we hit the 50-minute marker, which is perfect because we're on our final position group of the day, and that's the tight end position. Now, the tight end position is a barren wasteland in the NFL. There are 3 to 5 guys that you really are worth talking about. Everybody else can suck it. They're all completely useless, all of them. Unfortunately, it's not a position that you can get rid of necessarily on the football field, not yet anyway. But the NFL, to say it nicely, needs a dramatic influx of talent at the tight end position. And as I mentioned before, tight end is one of Bob's favorite positions. I would have thought he preferred wide receiver, considering that's the position he played in high school and that's the way he lives his life. But we're gonna go to the tight ends now. And you started quarterbacks. I went wide receivers. You started running backs. You started wide receivers. So I'm going to start us off with the tight ends. And for me, this was a pretty straightforward exercise. It was just a matter of who I like more, pretty much. But I got Trey McBride 1, Isaiah Likely 2, Greg Dulcich, whatever, the tight end from UCLA 3, Jelani Woods, tight end from Virginia 4. Where am I? Here we go. Jalen Weidermeyer 5. Now, I have 8 tight ends in my top 151, and I got a couple of guys sprinkled in there as well. So for shits and giggles, I'm just going to throw them out. Rutgert 6, Otten 7 from Washington, Charlie Kolar 8, Jake Ferguson from Wisconsin 9, and Cole Turner 10.
Okay.
You have those same 10 guys, or at least
I have a lot of similar guys. I have 8 tight ends in my top 152, but I don't have your same top 5. And I'm going to edit my top 5 on the fly because this article, my original top 300 came out before Weidermeyer ran he ran over a 5-second 40 or whatever. And there was a list I saw that showed all the tight ends that had over a pineapple. That had over a 5-second 40-yard dash, and the list of tight ends to get, like, there's one guy or 2 guys, like Jared Pinkney or whatever, who got drafted in the past, like, 5 years of tight ends who ran a 5-second 40 times. So it's not going to be good for him. But number 1, I have Trey McBride. Number 2, I have Isaiah Likely. Number 3, I have Jeremy Ruckert. 4 is Greg Dulcich. 5 is where I had Weidermeyer originally. He's not going to be there anymore. I'm going to put Jelani Woods up at 5. And then I have 6. Cade Otton will move. Weidermeyer 7. And then I'm going to have Charlie Kolar at 8. Dietrich Dees from San Jose State at 9. Jake Ferguson at 10.
Okay. All right. I like it. Now let me put my boy back up here real quick. Bow wow. It's Derek. All right. So we both have Trey McBride and Isaiah Likely as our top 2. You have Jeremy Ruckert as your number 3. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Ruckert didn't get many catch opportunities in college, which is pretty unfortunate. But I do consider him to be a pretty good athlete. And he didn't really drop any passes when he had the opportunity to go out there and get the ball. I consider him to be one of the better blocking tight ends in this class. I understand there are other guys who are solid blockers, but frankly, like someone like Greg Dulcich, I don't really want to leave him blocking. I don't feel like I need to. And frankly, he's probably a guy who I wouldn't value at that point. Now, I understand the concern with Jeremy Ruckert will be, like, he didn't get very many opportunities to go out and catch the ball. He had just 300 yards this past year. But I do view this as a player who can play inline quite a bit and have a lot more opportunities with. He's 250 pounds, about 6'5". At least that's what he was listed at in college. And I think he's a guy who gives you a little bit more versatility in the sense that he'll give you the run blocking. He'll create opportunities for you in that sense. I understand the NFL is kind of moving away from that. You mentioned a guy like Cole Turner, who's kind of the prototypical newer guy who's like a former receiver converted to tight end who now plays a lot in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Ruckert's not really going to be that guy for you. So he's a little bit of a different flavor than what you were probably looking for from a lot of modern NFL teams. But I do like his versatility to some extent. Even if it means he's going to get 600 receiving yards as opposed to 800, I still like that versatility a little bit more than what you might get with an Isaiah Likely or a Greg Dulcich.
Dude, 600 receiving yards for a rookie potentially at tight end. Would probably put him amongst like the league leaders at the position.
Well, that's true. Yeah, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you
Yeah.
understand my general point.
No, I get you. I mean, it's terrible. Yeah, no, I get you. That's totally fine. That's fine. That's fine.
So
Very well.
you had likely in McBride 1, 2, or you McBride 1 likely 2, like I do, right? We have the same
Yep.
top 2.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, where we differ, where you have Jeremy Ruckert, I went with Greg Dulcich, the tight end
Right.
from UCLA, as my number 3 guy. And honestly, it's splitting hairs because I think Jelani Woods is right there as well. And I love Woods' size at the position, 6'7". And I mean, the NFL loves a prototype, right? I said it before.
Yeah.
That's a thing. Now, these tight ends, they are all this is a weird position because a lot of these guys do fit the NFL mold for today, like the move tight end. Like you said, Cole Turner, he could be this class's Mike Gesicki, for example. Gesicki plays a lot in the slot. Yes, he's a tight end, but I know some of the drama earlier in the offseason when they franchise tagged Gesicki of the Dolphins, which I mean that blew my mind. I didn't understand why
They have so many tight ends on that roster. I was surprised they decided to do that.
Even beyond having the sheer numbers at the position, a position which is not that valuable in today's NFL. Gesicki, I had him on my fantasy team last year, and I was drinking the Kool-Aid going into the year, thinking, all right, this could be a nice backup tight end, nice receiving option, offers nothing as a blocker, but that means that's irrelevant in fantasy. All we care about is stats, baby. And I thought, well, Parker's always in and out of the lineup. I don't trust anything else they have at wide receiver. Tua is not the strongest armed quarterback, and young quarterbacks love their tight ends and love their slot guys and safety valves. So I figured, okay, maybe Mike Gesicki might have something. And is just completely just shat the bed. He had such an on and off season. I dropped him at one point, and I got completely repulsed. I think he had like 1 or 2 catches in back-to-back weeks, and I wanted to light his house on fire. I don't know. Maybe I have anger problems or something like that when it comes to fantasy sports. I shouldn't get that upset when a guy has 1 catch and 8 yards. But that's neither here nor there. All right, I was competing for chips. But anyway, I digress. There's value. Apparently, there's value for a guy like that. Okay, Mike Gesicki got franchise tagged. So, Cole Turner, yeah, we have him down there. I don't have him in my top 150. I have him way down the board for a number of reasons. But that might be something to look for. See how these teams use these guys. Now, I do want to go to Jalen Weidermeyer because he was at one point looked at as potentially the best tight end in this class and a potential first-round pick. But as you had mentioned when you were doing your rankings, because you said you're doing them on the fly, you released your rankings before he just – it might as well have been me running out there. It might as well have just been me. I can go out there right now, and I can do exactly what he did, all right? I mean, I'll probably put my hamstrings, but I can run a 5.2 40. Why not? Do it live. But, are we putting too much stock in the postseason pre-draft process with a guy like this? Are we overthinking it with a Jalen Weidermeyer? Because I've seen some crazy shit. I've seen things that say he's anywhere from a 3rd to 4th round pick to being potentially undrafted. So I think being undrafted is a little harsh for me personally because of what I've seen on tape. But what are your thoughts on the Jalen Weidermeyer situation? Are we overthinking it with this kid?
I don't think we are. I was always kind of surprised he was in the tight end 1 conversation, but then again, I think it's because his tight end class is just not very spectacular.
Awful.
Weidermeyer was never really a great athlete at the collegiate level. He never really does anything spectacularly. He's kind of was just this all-around player we were talking about as potentially being the guy to come out there and be the top tight end taken, but really he's not a great blocker despite his size. He's not really going to bring you as much there as someone like a Jeremy Ruckert will if you're trying to play in that way. He had a lot of drops this past year, 8 drop passes. 16.7% of his catchable passes were dropped this past year. That's not good. Then, of course, contested catches, about 50-50. So we're at the midline point. Would you like it to be higher, though, for a 10 with his size and build? Yeah, I don't think he's anything special. Let's just put it that way. This is a guy who probably will come into the NFL and be a backup to start his career. That's probably what we're looking at right now. And I think part of the issue is going to be, the hands are a little inconsistent. And again, like not great for size, not very snappy. He's not going to go in and out of the routes with any kind of speed per se. And at some point, you just have to wonder, what if I want an average tight end? Someone like Charlie Kolar, who actually puts a lot more effort into run blocking. We both have him at tight end 8. Someone who puts more effort into the run blocking, despite the fact he's not always successful at it. Someone who has larger build but knows the fact that he's not a super athlete, who just will go and find open areas and coverage and just sit down a la Zach Ertz and just get an open target for guys and just box defensive backs and linebackers out. Someone like that might actually be more valuable than Jaden Wildmeyer at this point.
Now, I have these 2 fruit flies flying around randomly, which is bugging the shit out of me because there's no food down here. And like
they see the pineapple, they're like, "Oh,
yo, that's what I'm saying." I pull out the pineapple, and it's not even a real pineapple. It's just Derek. It's my boy. It's got a little spring there. They see the pineapple, and now they're out. There's 2 of them, and I don't know what's going on, but I want to just grab it. I want to punch them because they're just like fluttering in front of my eyeballs, and I'm getting so angry. Sorry. Anyway, that fucking fruit flies aside. With Jalen Weidemeyer, I see him as a poor man's Brandon Pettigrew.
Ooh,
and I say that because as a Lions fan, who you telling? As a Lions fan, I remember when we drafted Pettigrew at the back end of the first round and seeing who was left on the board, and I was absolutely disgusted when we took him. I understood why, the whole prototype, the size, he could be an inline blocker. He was one of those find the seam kind of guys. But he was never athletic, like an athletic guy. You're not splitting Brandon Pettigrew wide. You're not putting Pettigrew in motion to the slot or something like that. He was an old school tight end. And when he came to the league, he didn't do jack squat. Wildly mediocre. That lack of athleticism showed up way too often. Whereas a guy like Eric Ebron is athletic through the roof, but he can't block me, and he couldn't catch a cold if he went skinny dipping in the Arctic. Ironically, also a Lions tight end. Are you seeing a trend?
And a former Steelers tight end. We both know this. We've both been hurt by this.
Booty cheeks. All right? Straight butt. This guy. Done with Eric Ebron. But anyway. Oh, he leaves Detroit and catches double-digit touchdowns at Indy. I want to punch him in the throat. Anyway. Sorry, I just had my Ruxin moment there, where Ruxin was anti-Antonio Gates. But anyway, moving on. Point is, he's a poor man's Brandon Pettigrew in my eyes, based on what we've seen in the pre-draft process. The lack of athleticism is glaring. But that's enough. I'm done with Jalen Weidemeyer, guys. But do you have anything else you want to touch on? Quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, anything that you haven't said? Any questions, concerns?
No, I would just say my tight end number 11 is, I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name, but it's Okonkwo, the one from Maryland, who actually tested really well, him and Jelani Woods. My only concerns with him would be, where do you play him? Like, if you're drafting this guy, you have to have a specific vision for him because he's not really a pure tight end. He's a guy you can maybe use like in a fullback a little bit, lining up in the backfield for some plays. It's going to be a guy you use in a lot of different ways. So if you're going to draft him, you probably have to be a creative team. I've got him pretty far down the board. I got him at 177 because I just don't know where he goes. He's a really good athlete, so I'm sure he'll find his place somewhere in the NFL. But I do think it's going to be a scheme-specific type fit.
Chigoziem Okonkwo.
That was a pretty good attempt. That sounds about right.
Chigo. I like that. Chigo Okonkwo. Okonkwo. Jesus Christ. You would think, watching these guys, following the draft for months, that we'd be on this. You know what? I do take solace though. There are professionals who get paid on a daily basis for this. Very good broadcasters who are just as bad at pronouncing names. So I feel bad, but not really, because I know this is one of those things that you can get by, like being a tight end who can't block real good, but he's a good receiver. You have a good career out of that. You'll take that. That's a win.
Yeah, that's a win.
All right. Is that it? Bootleg Sam Howell?
I think that's everything for today.
Woo! All right. And I just want to remind you guys that betting.net is not just sports betting. Betting.net compares the best online casinos. So sit back, relax, and play the top online slots, poker, and table games on betting.net. Wow. We've done a lot here. I can't wait for the next episode. Sam, why don't you give the people your credentials, the @ on Twitter?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Sam_Teats33, where I post all my latest content. You'll also find a link there in the pinned tweet to my newsletter, where I post all my content, such as the latest mock drafts, which I have a 3-round mock draft coming out tomorrow. I've got my big boards are there. I've got plenty of content there for you guys to go check out. I'm also on all other social media platforms. You can go check me out on YouTube. Sam Teats on YouTube. There's no one else with that name, trust me.
It's
a 101.
Woo! I am on Twitter and Instagram. I am at DB Talking Sports. D as in Dan, B as in Bob. Catch our show. I don't know when we're going to do the next one. We do it on Tuesdays, but tomorrow we're going to be doing the NFL show. Wednesday is NASCAR show with Risley, and Thursday we're doing Final Four, Risley and Goodpasser and myself. So we got a busy week coming up. I hope you catch you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. For Sam Teats, I am Dan Kornhauser. We look forward to catching you guys next week. Have a good one.